to this chess video. Today I will teach you the complete guide for beginners to playing chess. If you're new to chess, this video will be really helpful for you because I'm going to teach you everything: how to move the pieces, set up the board, and how to play a game, and even some winning tips and techniques. So stick to the end to learn more. So this is a chessboard, as you can see. The first step is to get familiar with the chessboard. The chessboard is an 8x8 board with 64 squares, 32 white and 32 dark. And as you can see, there are in total 32 pieces on the entire game, 16 black and 16 white. Let's start by taking a look at how to move the pieces. So I'm just going to clear the board. And I'm going to place the first piece, which is the most important piece. This piece is the king. The king, although it is the most important piece, it's not the most powerful. The king can move in any direction, upwards, downwards, sideways, or diagonally, but it can only move one square at a time. So for example, the king could move here, then the king could move here, and here. Another rule of the game is that the king cannot move to a space where it is attacked by the other pieces, by your opponent's pieces. So if any of your opponent's pieces is attacking where the king is going to move, then you cannot move the king there. That's because although the king is not the most important piece in chess, it is the most important piece in chess, because if you lose the king, which is called checkmate, which means setting the king up in a trap he can't escape, then the game is over. It's checkmate. Now, let me just reset this board, and I'm going to show you the other pieces. We'll start with the next piece, which is this piece right here. It's called the queen. The queen can move like the king, upwards, downwards, sideways, or diagonally, but differently from the king. As you can see, it can move as far as it wants. So for example, right here, the queen could go up, then it could go diagonally like that, then down like this, then maybe cross the board, or it can also make short moves. For example, this, or this. The queen can move as far as she wants, and it's not the most important piece, but it's definitely the most powerful. Now let me just reset the board real quick, and I'm going to show you that the most powerful piece after the queen, which is the rook. This is the rook, and the rook can move upwards, downwards, or sideways as far as it wants, but it cannot move diagonally. As you can see, the rook can maybe move here, then it can move here, cross the board down, go to the middle, or it can make some shorter moves. For example, this one, or this one. Just like that. Now, after the rooks come two knights, or horses, as maybe you like to call them, but generally they are called knights, which are the shape of a horse. A knight moves in an L shape. What does it mean in an L shape? Well, it moves one square, two squares in one direction and one square in the other. For example, two squares vertically and one horizontally, or it can also move two horizontally and one vertically. As you can see, this is a knight move, this is another knight move, and this is another knight move. An important aspect to comment here is that the knight is the only piece that can jump other over pieces. So, for example, if I have another piece right here, then the knight is the only piece that can jump over the other piece. But for example, if we had another piece, let's just delete this knight and put, for example, a rook, then the rook, as you can see, cannot move past the pawn. The knight is the only piece in chess that can jump over other pieces. Now let's clear the board again and let me show you the next piece, which are the bishops. These are the bishops, and the bishops can move as far as they want diagonally. As you can see, this is a bishop move. It can go right here, then it can go here, cross the board like that, and then go downwards. Or it can make shorter moves, for example, this one, or this one. The bishop can move as far as it wants, but only on the diagonals. And it's important to mention that on chess, you have two bishops. One moves only on the dark squares, and the other moves only on the light squares. So, no matter how much you move the bishops around, they're never going to block or intersect with one another. So, they will make actually a really, really good team. Next, let's talk about the final piece in chess, which is the pawn. The pawn is a very special piece, as you can see. The pawn can move only one square up the board, except for one occasion. If it's the first time that pawn moves, if it's on its starting square, then the pawn can choose to go either 2 squares or 1 square. So for example, this pawn is starting in its open square, so it can choose either to go to this square, to go just 1, or to go just 2. But after the first move, then they can only move vertically. Also, the pawns are the only piece in chess that cannot go backward. So as you can see, this pawn cannot go backward. It can only move forward. And the pawn captures pieces in a very special way. So let me just put another piece right here. Let's say a rook. And the pawn, instead of just capturing pieces, just advancing to that piece's square, then it captures one square diagonally, such as this. Or let me show you another pawn capture. Or this can be another pawn capture. Let's just get a piece right here, real quick. Also, I mentioned that pawns are the only piece that cannot go backward. So let me just reset the board here, real quick. Put a pawn right here. What happens when if pawns cannot go backward? Then what happens when they get to the other side of the board? Well, if this happens, the pawn can get promoted. Promoting means that you can exchange that pawn for any other piece you like. It can be a bishop, a rook, a knight, or even a queen. So let's promote to a queen right here. And as you can see, we now have a queen on the board. And it can promote to any piece except the king, and it cannot stay as a pawn. It can promote to any piece except for the king. Let me again choose. And if you're playing online, it doesn't even have to be one of the pieces that have already been captured. You can even advance your pawn and have 2 queens on the board, which is incredibly powerful and useful. So that's pawn promotion. So when it gets to the other side of the board, you get to replace it with any piece you like. Now let's go back for a second, and I'm going to show you another pawn rule, which is called en passant. Let me just clear the board here, and let's put some pawns. And the kings. The en passant rule is difficult, so make sure to put attention to it. If a pawn moves 2 squares on its first move, let me just move the king here real quick, and if a pawn of your other opponent moves 2 squares, think that it can only do on its first move, and it lands, as you can see, next to one of your pawns, then in that turn, and only in that turn, then you have the option to capture the pawn as if it had just moved one piece. one square. So you move your pawn to the square behind it, like that. And the pawn is captured and out the board. Notice that en passant must be done in exactly the next move that the opponent moves the pawn. After that, you lose the right to play it. And I'm going to show you the other weird rule of chess, which is called castling. So I'm going to just quickly reset the board here. That's right. And I'm going to place a king, a rook, and some pawns. Just like that. And I'm going to do the same for the other side. So rook, let's place it on the other side, and then some pawns. Let me just put them real quick. Castling is a weird rule of chess that it is used for two purposes actually. It's one of the purposes of castling is protecting your king, finding a shelter on the back of the pawns, and also developing your rook toward the center of the board so it's more active. So to castle, you can move your king 2 squares to any direction and then move your rook to the square that the king next to the king. So let me show you. So the king moves 2 squares and the rook moves to the square next to the pawn. So when the king moves, then the rook will move to the square next to the king. Let me show you in action. So as you can see, they like exchange positions, to tell them like that. And castling can happen both to the king side and the queen side, or left or right. So as you can see, if I'm playing with black here, I can also castle to the left. It's a very great way to develop your pieces, to protect your king and also develop your rook so that it's more active. But it has its drawback that the king is alone on its corner, so it might be vulnerable for bankrupt checkmates, which I'll explain in a future video. So let me know in the comments if you want to. But this is another great way of protecting your king and developing your rook into action. Now, let me just reset the board real quick and I will show you how to put the board correctly, how to set up the board to play. First, make sure that every player has a dark square on their lower left corner, as you can see right here. And now, first we'll place the rooks. I like to do it in order. So first, we'll place the rooks and we'll place them on the corners of the board. So I'm going to place 2 white rooks here and the black rooks on all the other corners, just like that. Next come the knights. So place a knight next to each rook, such as I'm showing to you on the screen. Next, we put the bishops. The bishops are put next to the knights, as you can see here. And then come the king and queen, but they have only 2 squares, so does it matter where they're placed? Yes, it does matter. The queen always starts on its colored square. So the white queen starts on a white square and the black queen starts on a dark square. Like that. Make sure they are completely aligned, just like that. And then on the remaining space, just place the kings. And now for the pawns. For the pawns, we just put them on the next row on the board, such as this. Let me just place them real quick right here. And we put another black pawns here. So this is how to set up the chessboard correctly, as you can see here. So that's how to place the board correctly. Now it is time for the chess notation. Chess notation is a way to record your moves and then you can look back to see if you have made any mistakes. So let me just load a chessboard here, and I will show you chess notation. So let's start with the rook. So first, you place the rook, the letter of the piece you like to move. You're going to move. So for example, for rooks, it's an R, a capital R. So then, for the queen is a capital Q for queen. For the king is a capital K. For the knight is a capital N, because the K of knight is already occupied by the king, so we go to the next letter. And the bishops are represented with a capital B. And pawns, I will show you pawns in just a second, how to notate pawns. Let's start with the main pieces. So first you mark the piece, the letter of the piece that is moving. In this case, we're moving the queen. So when we're moving the queen, we first have to notate the letter Q, which is the letter for the queen. So we first write queen, and then we write the coordinates of the square that the queen is moving to. For example, you might have noticed that on the bottom of my chessboard there are some letters, and on the left there are some numbers and some letters. So these actually represent coordinates. So for example, this square I'm going to show you, this is E5 because that's where the E column and the fifth row, that's where they line up. So this move will be known as Queen E5. So Q, capital Q, E, and then 5. An important aspect to note is that the letter of the columns is always written in lowercase, while the letter representing the piece is always written in uppercase. So it's capital Q, lowercase e, 5. Now, let's say that the queen is capturing a piece on the E5 square. So, to notate it, we are going to write an X after the letter that of the piece. So it will be Q, capital Q, X, which means captures, and then the piece and then the square that we move to when we capture, in this case, E5, as you can see there. So Q, capital Q, X, E5. So that's how to notate captures. Now let's notate, I'll show you notating later, but for now we're going to cover important aspects of chess, and then I'll show you how to notate each one of them. The first aspect that we're going to cover is check. So check actually means when one of your opponent's pieces is threatening to capture your king. As you can see, if the rook moves to the h6 square, as you can see, the black king is in danger of being captured. As you can see, if black doesn't do anything, if it moves the other piece, then on the next turn, then the rook can capture the king. So check is basically a way of saying, be careful, king in danger. Let me show you another example of check. So I'm gonna just clear a board here real quick, and I'm gonna put a black king and a queen, and just like that. So as you can see, I can move my queen to the e4 square, and the black king is in check because, as you can see, on the next turn the white queen is able to capture the black king. Remember that the king is the most important piece in chess. Now, when a check happens, you can't just ignore the check. For example, if I just clear the board real quick and just place a rook, a king, another king, and let's say a pawn. as you can see, when a check happens, for example, if we move the rook to d5 and we check the black king, black cannot ignore the check. Black cannot just play another thing with the pawn, because then the rook is able to capture the king. So when a check happens, you must deal with a check, and I will show you the 3 ways to get out of check right now. The first one is to move. The first one is the simplest one, which is to move your king to a square where it is not threatened. For example, right here. So now there's no piece that attacks the king. Right? I want to show you the other one. I'm going to clear this board real quick. King, rook. Let's place the rook here. And let's place a bishop. Let's place it right here. The second way to defend against check is, for example, if we play rook to c5 check. Okay, let's just move the king. And if we play rook to c5 checking, the other way to get out of check is to capture the piece that is threatening your king. For example, as you can see, this bishop can now capture the rook, just like that. And now let me just show you the third way to get out of check, which is another simple one. Let me clear the board, and it is to simply, as you can see, let's put a bishop here. The other way to get out of check is, for example, oh my god, I put it wrong. I'm so sorry. This video is getting so long with me setting up the pieces. I'm really sorry. So when we check the black king, say with rook d5 check, then the black bishop can move to this square, because as you can see, it blocks the check. It moves one of the pieces in front of the king to protect the king. Now, let's go back and check a position, which is, let's say, this. Let me put the pieces real quick. So, this position. So, as you can see, the black king is in check, but it cannot do any of the options mentioned above. It cannot move to a safe square because, as you can see, all of the escape squares of the king are covered. It cannot block the check because it doesn't have any more pieces. And also, black cannot capture the piece that is threatening the king. So when the king is in check and cannot escape with any of the options mentioned, then it's said that the king is in checkmate. And when that happens, it's game over. So the player with the king that was checkmated loses. And in this case, white, because it's the one that delivered the checkmate, in this case, white wins. So checkmate is the entire point of chess. It doesn't matter who has captured the most pieces, or who has the most material, or I don't know, anything else. The entire point of chess is to checkmate the enemy king, and also to protect your own king so that the other person doesn't checkmate your king. Now, let's say there's another type of situation. I'm going to put it right here real quick. I'm going to put black king here. And a queen here. In this position, as you can see, the king currently is not in check. There is currently no piece that is threatening to capture the black king. As you can see, there where it is, there is no white piece that can capture it. But as you can see, black's king cannot do anything. If it moves here, then it'll be check, check, and check. So when this happens in a position where the king is not in check, but it also cannot move, it is said that the game is a stalemate. A stalemate means that the king does not have a legal square to move, but it is also not in check. And when this happens, it's a draw, so nobody wins. So that's another position in chess. Let me just reset the board right here real quick. And I'm going to show you how to notate all of these. So, to notate, I'm just going to talk. I'm not going to display it on the board. To notate a check, you just write a plus sign next to at the end of the move. So, for example, queen to e3 and a plus, which means check. For checkmate, you use the pound sign or the numeral sign or how you call it. So you put it at the end. And for stalemate, when it's a draw, you just I'll show you. And for stalemate, it doesn't really have a notation figure, an algebraic notation, but I will be doing a video on advanced chess notation, so be subscribed so when I upload that. So thanks for watching this video. So hopefully this will get you started in chess. But I want to point out one more teeny bit thing. And that is, what is this Queen's Gambit thing everyone's talking about? Well, the Queen's Gambit is actually an opening in chess. And it starts with the moves pawn to d4, as you can see here, pawn to d5, as you can see here, and then pawn to c4. As you can see, this is the Queen's Gambit. And it has many variations, and I will show you many variations on the next video. So this is the Queen's Gambit opening, so now you know what that means thanks to the Netflix series. So hopefully that will get you started in chess, and I hope you enjoyed the video. So I'll see you in the next video.